Is this a sign that the second half of 2023 is going to be so much better for horror? Please. What's going on, everybody, and welcome to my review of Cobweb. If you have no idea what this movie is, I don't blame you, because unfortunately this is one of those movies that, due to mismarketing or just a victim of circumstance, is going to be probably one of the most overlooked films of 2023. Lionsgate really has not advertised this movie very much. I have yet to see a trailer for it. I've seen no social media presence for it. And unfortunately, it's being dropped in select theaters, mind you, the weekend that Barbie and Oppenheimer are out. And if that's not enough, Talk to Me, the latest A24 film that's right around the corner, is sucking up all of the horror talk and horror hype. So this thing is just going to go completely under the radar. And I'm here to rectify that as much as I can. So if you caught it a couple of days ago, I released a video talking about a ranking of all of my most anticipated horror films for the rest of 2023, and Cobweb was fairly high on that list, and I had only heard of it because I was doing research for that video and just came across that title on a Screen Rant article. Otherwise, I might not have even realized this thing was coming out this weekend, but it sounded interesting enough. The fact that Evan Goldberg and Seth Rogen were producing it gave me a little bit more interest because they're pretty successful producers in my mind. And luckily, I reached out to Lionsgate and they very quickly gave me a screener. Thank you guys so much, by the way, because this thing was nowhere near me. Closest theater that it was playing in was 2.5 hours away, and that's a hard ask for a movie that they just didn't seem to have very much confidence in. And I'm here to tell you, they should have had more confidence in this thing, because this was one of the more surprising horror experiences that I've had so far this year. And unless we have some awesome films coming down the pipe for the next 6 months, this is destined to at least be in my top 5 horror flicks of 2023. So I walked into this thing blind. All I read was the basic plot synopsis when I was doing my video the other day, and to be honest with you, the plot synopsis doesn't even really accurately tell you what this movie's about, and I encourage you to walk into this movie blind. All that I will tell you is that it's about a frightened kid that is bullied that starts to hear things in his walls at night. And that's really only the kickoff of the crazy shit this movie has in store for you. So starting off with the positives for Cobweb, it is always such a rewarding and refreshing experience for me to watch a horror film, especially, that can genuinely surprise me, more than once at that. I don't want to get too crazy. I don't want to hype you guys up too much, so please come a little bit closer, listen to me, heed my words. Don't take this statement for more than what it's actually saying. This movie reminded me a lot of what it was watching Barbarian last year, to where every time I felt like things were going in a somewhat predictable direction and I sat back and got all cocky like, this is obvious where this is going, they take a hard turn, and it did it at least twice in this movie. And I love those types of experiences. Even if it doesn't all completely come together, it is so refreshing to me to be surprised because it's so rare. All of the performances of the main characters, the family that this is focused on, you got Woody Norman playing Peter, the little kid, the main protagonist. You have Anthony Starr that you guys will recognize as Homelander, or for the more seasoned folks, the guy from Banshee, a show that, yet again, I'm gonna tell you is fucking awesome and you should watch it. And of course, Lizzie Kaplan, who I used to see in a lot of comedies in the early 2000s, and she's made quite a nice name for herself doing a lot more dramatic TV work. All three of them are great. Peter is a character that you immediately endear yourself to because of the situation that he continues to be in, as worse as it gets. And for a child actor, which is always a big toss-up, he did really well in the scenes where he's supposed to act emotional and scared and terrified. Anthony Starr and Lizzie Kaplan are creepy as fuck. There are few things scarier whenever you are put into the shoes of a child and his parents just unnerve you because of their personalities and the way that they talk and the way that they interact with each other. Lizzie Kaplan especially was really unnerving to me because for a while I didn't even know if it was overacting. She had like this piece of her character to where the mother seemed like she was being fed cue cards of what to say, like what the perfect mother would say in any given situation, and it just seemed like somebody trying to be more human than they actually are. That's not a spoiler, it's just the way that her performance comes across. It's just very weird. And Anthony Starr, as we've seen in every breakout role that this guy has had that he is known for, that guy is just intense. And when he gets intense, he's fucking scary. I especially liked the way that this movie utilized lighting and shadows and silhouettes especially. There's very much like a horror film fairy tale vibe going on with this movie, both with the narrative as well as just the visual, the way that it's brought to life and the direction. And there's more than a few segments to where you're kind of put in the eyes of Peter as he's watching things, and he's only able to see silhouettes and shadows, and you kind of have to fill in the blank of what is going on, and it's all visual storytelling. It's like the ultimate definition of show, don't tell. And I thought it was genuinely creepy. I thought that it was really well utilized, and it kind of brings a nice little style to this movie that I don't see used very often. And going along with visuals, I gotta praise not only the sound design, but the score as well. Again, really feeding into that fairy tale come to life vibe, to where multiple points in this movie, the music behind it really adds to that growing eeriness, that uneasiness of just not knowing exactly what is going on and where things are going. And especially in the third act, when things start to become revealed and you start to see what exactly is going on, some really good sound design in the moments where you're kind of obscured from completely seeing what is going on. And finally, I gotta praise the movie for being one of those, again, rare horror films that is able to make me nervous and scared and on edge without resorting to a bunch of jump scares, without resorting to all of the bag of tricks that we see most studio horror films go for. This one has much more of a slow build of tension and a slow build of uneasiness. And even in the moments when they do lean into the more typical studio horror scares and setups for scares, they're able to kind of subvert your expectations on where those scares are going. Where usually you can see the setup, you can hear the music swell down, you can see something kind of moving in the corner, and you're like, okay, this is about to jump out, this is about to be behind the door, this is gonna jump out of the shadows. And every time it gave me the feeling that that was gonna happen, something else would happen, and that's effective scares. Moving on to the mixed, I really appreciated the way that this movie was able to subvert a lot of the tropes of movies like this, and there's quite a few here. There's a lot of cliches and tropes at play, but most of them, it's able to kind of head down a familiar direction, but then pull the rug out from under you with where that pays off or where that ultimately heads. And to me, that's a smart use of tropes and cliches within this genre, of which there's many. And if you're somebody that watches a lot of horror films, you can see them coming 10,000 miles away. With that being said, though, there's still a small handful of them that the movie still kind of falls victim to. And it's going to depend on who you are. Some people are going to be much more impressed with the ones that they subvert, and they're going to forgive the couple that are a little predictable and a little bit more familiar. And I would not argue at all with somebody that sees this and says, yeah, they did a good job, but it was still a very derivative movie. It's still pulling a lot of things that I've seen from other films. Like one that I can give you that's not a spoiler whatsoever that is absolutely derivative is this bully scenario that is pulled right out of Let the Right One In. I mean, almost to a T. And there's a couple of elements in the movie like that. So it's a shame that it couldn't be 100% successful with it, but I think it's far more successful than it falls victim to the cliches. And now moving on to the negatives, there is a secondary character that comes into play here of Peter's teacher, Miss Devine, and she's the one that really cares about Peter and starts to see that there's something not quite right about his home situation and can tell that he's uneasy about something, and slowly throughout the movie she starts to insert herself a little bit more and starts to peel back the onion a little bit more about what is going on. And I just never fully bought into this character. Part of it is the performance. I felt like the performance was a little bit off. There wasn't quite an edge of believability there to a teacher going quite that far. And it just, I don't know, something about the attachment that she had to the kid just never really came through for me. The other side of it is that there's multiple points in the movie, especially in the back half, where I just didn't believe the actions of the character. And that's, again, one of the tropes of horror films sometimes, is you have to have characters do things that they would never do in a real life situation to keep the plot going. Sometimes that's forgivable. Sometimes it kind of tears apart the success of the movie a little bit, and I feel like it did tear apart a little bit of what was going on in the second half for me. I just didn't buy it. And the only other negative that I have, and again, without saying too much, there is something throughout the movie that you start to see, that you start to get a little bit more of a picture of, that you start to see more complete glimpses of. And I felt like that was 100% effective when it was sticking to that. When it got to the point near the end of the film when they actually show you a good bit more of what you have been seeing, to me, that was a mistake. Not only did I not like what I saw, but I felt like it was much more effective being obscured and being kind of out of focus and not the focus of certain shots. So, creative choice that I just didn't think paid off. But all in all, guys, this is not gonna be many people's favorite horror films of the year. We've had things like Scream and Evil Dead that are undoubtedly gonna be the more popular picks for most people, but this thus far has been the most surprising horror film of the year for me, and I tend to value that a little bit more. I really liked the way that it subverted my expectations and sent me on some twists and turns that I did not see coming, genuinely creeped me out, fell apart a little bit here and there, wasn't the perfect experience that it could have been with just a few slight tweaks for my own personal taste, but it's one that I'm really going to recommend, and I hope all of you guys keep your eyes out for it, either in select theaters or when it eventually gets a wide release or goes to VOD. Please check it out. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my 2023 new release reviews, and I'm also going to put that most anticipated horror films for the rest of the year video. If you haven't seen that, check out a lot more horror movies yet to come in 2023. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't see my eventual reviews of all of those horror flicks, and as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.